You are 19 years old when German soldiers first enter Lyon. It is June 19th, 1940. One moment you are tightening the spokes on a delivery bicycle inside your father's repair shop. The next, armored vehicles are rolling past the doorway beneath unfamiliar flags. The vibration makes the dented brass bell on your own bicycle ring by itself. Your 13-year-old sister, Lucy, reaches out and stops it with one finger. Everyone around you says the fighting must finally be ending. You do not yet understand that defeat can be the beginning of a different kind of war. 4 years later, you will carry explosives toward a railway line on that bicycle. Before then, you must learn how an ordinary street becomes dangerous one neighbor at a time. Your father, André Moreau, owns 3 workbenches, 2 good wrenches, and a permanent suspicion of cheap bearings. Your mother, Marguerite, alters clothing for families who can no longer afford anything new. Elise Bernard lives above the bakery across the street. She works as a junior clerk in a municipal records office. Your closest friend, Mathieu Caron, repairs signals for the railway outside Perrache station. You expect to inherit the shop, marry Elise, and complain about customers until your hair turns white. Then, France collapses in 6 weeks. The government signs an armistice. German troops leave Lyon in early July because the city falls inside the unoccupied zone. People fill the cafes and pretend their relief is the same thing as freedom. Marshal Pétain speaks through the radio and promises order, protection, and national renewal. Your father listens because Pétain was a hero to men of his generation. He says France has already buried enough sons. Vichy officials replace signs, censor newspapers, and demand loyalty from men who still call themselves French. Elise copies birth records, while new regulations decide which citizens deserve fewer rights than others. French police can enforce those rules without a German uniform anywhere nearby. Another lesson arrives inside a bicycle tire. In February 1941, a woman named Madeleine Vautrin brings a black touring bicycle into the shop. She is a widow in her 40s who owns a stationery store near Croix-Rousse. She asks you to replace a front wheel that is already perfectly straight. When your father steps into the back room, Madeleine removes a wrapped packet from inside the spare tire. She asks whether you make deliveries north of the river. You tell her bicycle mechanics deliver bicycles, not mysterious packages. She says the distinction is exactly why no one will search you. The packet contains printing stencils and several pages of a clandestine newspaper. The pages say France is not Pétain and surrender is not consent. Possessing or distributing them can bring prison or worse. You think about Elise stamping documents that remove people from their own country. Then you slide the packet beneath your repair tools. Your first resistance mission looks exactly like an ordinary bicycle delivery, which is what makes it possible. You ride toward the Saône with grease on your sleeves and Madeleine's bicycle beside you. A Vichy gendarme stops traffic at the bridge. The packet sits beneath 3 tire levers and a coil of brake cable. You complain about customers who damage good equipment and blame the mechanic. He lifts one rag, sees grease, and waves you through. The address belongs to a small printer working behind a locked courtyard. Madeleine later explains that the less each person knows, the more of the network survives an arrest. You carry unread messages, ration cards, forged work permits, and bundles of clandestine newspapers. Madeleine teaches you to notice the same coat twice and never lead a follower home. She also tells you to repair the dented bell because everyone recognizes its ugly sound. You remove the clapper instead. The bell remains on the handlebar, but can no longer betray you. Elise discovers the truth in the summer of 1941. That evening, she waits inside the repair shop after your father closes. Elise places a stack of blank identity forms on the workbench. She has been removing one at a time from spoiled batches at the records office. "If you are going to lie to me," she says, "at least use better paper." She knows which stamps have changed and which officials check signatures carefully. You know the alleys, courtyards, and repair routes between the rivers. You and Elise begin meeting in different places precisely because you want to meet in only one. The resistance feels like strangers performing small illegal tasks without knowing whether the others will arrive. For months, your greatest weapon is a pump that does not leak. In August 1942, French authorities conduct roundups across the southern zone. Madeleine arrives after midnight with 2 new photographs, and no greeting. They belong to Samuel and Miriam Levy, aged 16 and 9, whose father is a tailor your mother knows. Their parents have been taken, and the apartment where they were hiding is no longer safe. Elise must turn the photographs into identities that can survive a train inspection. Samuel becomes your cousin from Saint-Étienne, and Miriam becomes his younger sister, Marie. Your task is to take them to a farm outside Bourg-en-Bresse. Miriam sits on your rear carrier with a loaf of bread across her knees. At a road checkpoint, 2 French policemen inspect travelers beneath a portrait of Pétain. One officer studies Miriam's identity card longer than the others. He asks what village her mother was born in. You do not know the answer Elise wrote. Miriam looks at your silent brass bell. Then she complains that her useless uncle promised to repair it before the journey. The officer laughs at your embarrassment and hands the card back. For the next kilometer, nobody speaks until Miriam says good liars always blame relatives. Samuel asks how long he must remain someone else, and you answer until France becomes itself again. When you return, your father is waiting beside the locked shop door. He asks whether you understand what happens to the family of a captured courier. You tell him families are already being taken while careful people watch. Your mother quietly places a jacket with a hidden inner pocket on the counter. He says courage is becoming far too crowded in his own house. On November 11, 1942, German forces occupy the southern zone. German security services establish themselves in the city. Madeleine gives everyone code names and divides the network into separate cells. You become mécanicien, the mechanic. You are told never to say Madeleine's real name again. The hidden radio moves beneath a loose section of flooring in the repair shop. After curfew, your family gathers around it at the lowest possible volume. The BBC arrives through static, with news Vichy newspapers do not print. Your father still dislikes de Gaulle's speeches. He now dislikes the men searching French homes considerably more. One January evening, German soldiers and French police enter the building during a neighborhood search. You lift the floorboard, but a cable remains visible beside the workbench. Your mother stands over it and unfolds a coat as if checking the hem. A German soldier notices the fresh scratches in the wood. Before he can bend down, André kicks a tray of ball bearings across the floor. The soldier slips, curses, and points his weapon toward your father. André begins shouting about careless apprentices ruining precision parts. The patrol searches the cupboards, takes 2 bicycle lamps, and leaves. André closes the door and looks at the loose floorboard. If you hide a radio again, he says, use old nails. In February 1943, the Vichy government expands compulsory labor service. Mathieu receives his summons at the railway depot. He burns it inside a signal lantern. The resistance arranges a place for him with a Maquis group in the Aisne countryside. Your job is to deliver forged papers and guide him onto a freight train leaving Lyon. Milice officers patrol the platform beside uniformed Germans. Mathieu carries a toolbox and wears a railway jacket 2 sizes too large. The train begins moving before the inspection reaches his wagon. Then a milice officer recognizes him from the depot. Mathieu jumps from the slow wagon and runs between stacks of freight. You release the brake on a luggage bicycle you have been pretending to repair. It rolls downhill into a tower of empty milk cans. The platform disappears beneath noise, rolling metal, and angry officials. Mathieu climbs into a different wagon while everyone looks toward you. The milice officer grabs your coat and asks whether the accident was deliberate. You show him a broken brake cable you cut 10 minutes earlier. He hits you, confiscates the bicycle, and calls you an idiot. You have never been happier to be underestimated. 2 days later, a message confirms Mathieu reached the countryside. The message also says he wants the resistance to reimburse the milk company. By spring, men avoiding forced labor enter hiding places across France, though many lack weapons or training. You carry medicine and bicycle parts into the countryside while returning with reports for Lyon. Then the resistance leadership in Lyon suffers a devastating blow. On June 21, 1943, Jean Moulin and other senior figures are arrested at Courier. The news spreads through the underground, but nobody knows which address or follower caused the disaster. Madeleine cancels every meeting for a week. She tells you arrests do not travel alone. The network abandons 2 apartments and moves its small printing operation overnight. You load cases of metal type beneath bicycle frames in a handcart. Elise carries blank paper inside bundles labeled as laundry. Police vehicles block the main street before you reach the new cellar. Madeleine leads you through connected courtyards and narrow passages behind the buildings. The handcart catches on a stone step. A wooden case opens, and metal letters spill across the ground. You, Elise, and Madeleine collect the type while boots pass beyond the courtyard gate. The letter F remains missing. Madeleine says the occupation already has too many of those. In September, Madeleine fails to arrive at a scheduled meeting. A chalk mark on her shop shutter warns that the location is compromised. On the second street, you see a familiar customer following on foot. You cross the river, abandon the bicycle inside a warehouse, and leave through a rear yard. The man continues after the empty street. By evening, Elise has warned the remaining cell. Madeleine does not return. Weeks later, a released prisoner reports seeing her inside Montluc prison. After that, there is only silence. Your instinct is to attack the first German office you can reach. The network leader tells you anger is not a target. For several months, you return to carrying messages and waiting. You wait for London to announce an invasion. You wait for every knock on the shop door to become an arrest. On May 26, 1944, Allied bombers approach Lyon to attack railway installations. Your family runs toward the cellar as explosions move across the district. Windows collapse into the shop, and the front door disappears beneath dust. The bombs damage rail facilities and part of the German security headquarters. They also strike homes occupied by the people the Allies claim to be liberating. You crawl into the street and find Elise digging beside a collapsed wall. Her mother is trapped in the bakery cellar. André uses a bicycle frame as a lever while neighbors clear broken masonry by hand. They reach her alive, while other families across the neighborhood are less fortunate. That evening, the BBC reports successful attacks on enemy transport. Nobody in your street uses the word successful. The war refuses to provide clean sides to every event. 5 days later, coded personal messages begin appearing more frequently in BBC broadcasts. On the night of June 5th, the phrase finally arrives through the repaired radio. The railway sabotage plan is active. Your group must cut a line used to move German forces north. Mathieu returns from the Maquis after dark with a beard, a pistol, and none of his old jokes. He embraces you, then asks whether the bicycle bell is still broken. You tell him silence is the only repair that lasted. A trained saboteur named Bernard carries charges prepared elsewhere. Elise remains at the radio to receive any cancellation or change. Your bicycle panniers look as if they contain replacement chains. Near the track, Mathieu cuts the communication wire while Bernard works at a rail joint. You watch a road crossing through the spokes of your front wheel. The schedule says no civilian train should pass before dawn. Then a locomotive whistle sounds from the south. Mathieu recognizes the engine as a railway maintenance train crewed by French workers. Bernard says the patrol road will bring Germans within minutes. Finishing now may destroy the French train, but waiting may bring the patrol before you escape. The mission has become a choice no message from London can make. You ride onto the service road and wave a covered lamp toward the locomotive. The driver sees you, but cannot stop in time. The maintenance train passes the rail joint while sparks rise beneath its wheels. Headlights appear on the patrol road. Bernard completes the sabotage as the final wagon clears. The explosion tears open the track behind the French crew. German soldiers fire toward the trees. Mathieu falls beside the drainage ditch with blood spreading through his sleeve. You lift him onto the rear carrier and push the bicycle into the darkness. The dented bell remains silent while branches strike the handlebars. You reach a farmhouse before sunrise. Mathieu's wound is painful, but survivable. The German military train expected later that morning cannot use the damaged line. You never learn how long it was delayed or whether another route replaced it. Resistance stories often end with certainty that the people inside them never possessed. At dawn, the radio announces Allied troops have landed in Normandy. For the first time, liberation has a location, though it remains hundreds of miles away. During the summer, resistance groups become more open and more heavily armed. German forces and the milice answer with raids, arrests, and reprisals. The bicycle shop becomes a repair point for machines no customer officially owns. Lucy, now 17, watches the street and remembers faces better than any adult in the cell. Your father objects until she reminds him that he taught her to recognize bad bearings by sound. In July, police search the shop again. This time, they find the repaired radio beneath a stack of tires. André says it belongs to him before anyone else can speak. He is arrested and taken toward Montluc. You try to follow the vehicle on your bicycle. Elise pulls you into an alley before the guards see you. Running after a prison truck cannot rescue your father. It can only provide the prison with another Moreau. You continue working because stopping would make his choice useless. On August 15th, Allied forces land in southern France. German units prepare to withdraw from Lyon while destroying what they cannot carry. On August 24th, word reaches your cell that Montluc prison is being liberated. You run toward the prison with FFI fighters and families searching for names. The gates open onto prisoners too exhausted to celebrate. Andre emerges supported by another man. He is thinner, bruised, and furious that nobody has maintained the shop properly. You hold him without answering. Madeleine is not among the prisoners. Records indicate she was transferred away months earlier. No document tells you where her journey ended. On September 2nd, German forces retreat from Lyon and demolish bridges behind them. Smoke rises where familiar crossings stood that morning. The city is liberated on September 3rd. Men who joined the resistance last week wear armbands beside people who served for years without names. Some suspected collaborators are dragged into public squares. A baker points toward a woman who once served German officers in her cafe. The crowd demands that you confirm she was an informer. You have never seen her at a police office or a compromised meeting. You refuse. You think of Madeleine teaching that ignorance must never pretend to be information. Liberation does not automatically make every frightened person just. General de Gaulle visits Lyon later that month and calls it the capital of the resistance. You stand beside Elise, Mathieu, and your family. Andre leans on the same cane he carried before the war. The people missing from the crowd occupy more space than those present. The war in Europe continues until May 1945. Soldiers return, prisoners return, and deportees return in numbers too small for the families waiting. Samuel Levy survives under his false name and comes back searching for Miriam. Miriam returns from the farm, but their parents do not return. Madeleine's name appears on lists, then disappears from revised lists, then appears again without a confirmed fate. You and Elise marry in 1946 without pretending the future has become predictable. Mathieu returns to the railway and refuses every promotion involving paperwork. Lucy becomes a clerk for an organization tracing missing and displaced people. Your father resumes criticizing cheap bearings from the front workbench. He never speaks about Montluc unless another former prisoner is present. You understand because footsteps behind you still change the route home. The resistance becomes cleaner in commemorative speeches than it ever felt while happening. You remember rival groups, wrong passwords, missing supplies, frightened couriers, and arguments beside broken bicycles. You also remember that imperfect people still carried children, printed truth, hid fugitives, and damaged an occupying army. When your son asks whether you were a hero, you say you repaired bicycles. You are answering it as honestly as you can. Years pass, and the brass bell remains silent on a hook above your workbench. You kept the dent and never replaced the clapper. Its silence once protected messages, forged papers, and a wounded friend. You listen for rubbing brakes and loose spokes before touching a tool. One spring afternoon, your granddaughter arrives with a bicycle inherited from Lucy. She points toward the old brass bell and asks why it cannot ring. You tell her there was a time when silence kept people alive. She asks whether that time is over. Outside, students ride across a rebuilt bridge without showing papers to anyone. Newspapers criticize the government openly at a corner kiosk. A railway whistle sounds, and no one looks for a place to hide. You find a small spring and a new clapper in the parts drawer. Your hands still remember the repair. The bell rings once across the workshop. Andre would complain that the tone is uneven. Madeleine would say everyone on the street can identify you now. Elise smiles from the doorway because both observations are true. For years you believed resistance meant refusing to obey. Later you believed it meant carrying out the mission despite fear. Now you understand it also meant protecting the ordinary life that occupation tried to make impossible. The bell rings again when your granddaughter wheels the bicycle outside. This time, nobody needs it to remain silent.